me in giving him a very warm welcome, and let's start.
Dear Chair Veeramani, dear colleagues and students, it's a great pleasure to be back in CDS. I think it's a long time since I gave a seminar here. As a minister, I have been here a number of times for functions, but that's very different from my academic discourse. Recently, I have published a book, Kerala, Another Possible World. That's available in the library. I've given few copies. So it's a simple book. I would say deceptively simple. And my talk today is based upon it. I'll be brief so that there can be more time for debate and discussion. Now, in Kerala, we have been following a redistributed development strategy. It has three components. One, redistribution of income through collective bargaining. You know, the wages in Kerala is much higher than national average. That's a form of redistribution. And second, redistribution of assets through land reforms is a very big watershed event in the 1970s. And third, public provisioning of services, education, healthcare, and so on. Now, I'm not going to dilate on these issues. All these contributed to, say, ensuring basic needs of the ordinary people and encourage social mobility so that Kerala today ordinary people enjoy a relatively high quality of life. This is a standard statement which doesn't have to be elaborated. Now, I joined the MPhil program in CDS in 1976, more than 4.5 decades back. And then already we were debating, discussing whether there was a trade-off between growth and equity. Particularly, there was total stagnation in the economy in 1970s and 1980s. But even before I had completed my PhD, it was very clear that migration and increase in remittances was resulting in an acceleration of growth. In fact, if you look at the time, now this is also standard presentation. Kerala's growth can be divided into pre-1987 and post-1988. You will find a dramatic contrast, say, in the rate of growth between these two periods. The per capita income growth increasing by about 6 times from 1% per annum to 6% per annum the second period. So all this disquiet regarding trade-off between equity and growth was laid down. And things looked very bright. But now today, after, say, about 3 decades after this momentous break that happened with migration, we are facing new challenges. Now, these challenges are basically threefold. One, the second generation problems in the service sectors and stagnation in the petty production. Two, infrastructure deficit. Three, educated unemployment. These are the three new challenges. Now, this has to be posed in this manner because we have good redistribution and welfare. Growth is also not bad, but then what's the problem? These are the problems. Now, in trying to address these three problems, it became evident that we need to have a new development paradigm for Kerala. So this also new development paradigm has three components. One is devolution and participation, the decentralized planning, PPC, People's Planning Campaign. You devolve so that people can participate to improve the quality of the services and improve the productivity of the petty production sectors on which they are owners of the means of production. Second, infrastructure deficit, you have extra budgetary financing, KIFBI, so that investment in infrastructure take place. How to resolve educated unemployment? We have something what is called knowledge economy, which means focusing on knowledge growth sectors or skill-based or service-based sectors to transforming the economic base, technological base of the production in Kerala so that a significant jump in the productivity do take place. And third, restructuring of higher education so that new knowledge is produced and innovation is promoted. Okay. Now, I am not going to deal with 1 and 2, 1 and 3 in this lecture. I'm going to focus on now a currently topical, controversial issue of financing through KIFBI. Why do we need some extra budgetary intervention? Now, this graph will make it very clear. The red line reflects all states' average capital expenditure to GDP ratio, and the blue line, Kerala's capital expenditure to GDP, GSDP. Now it's very clear. You'll find right from 1999, if you had extrapolated to 1950s, you would have found the same. All states' average capital expenditure has been much higher than Kerala. Kerala has been inching forward, but still below national average. And the recent period, the difference has tended to widen. If you take, say, capital expenditure to revenue expenditure ratio, the same picture more or less comes out. What's my argument? My argument is simply this. For many decades, Kerala has been underinvesting in infrastructure. For the simple reason we have been focusing upon social sectors. Therefore, the gap in the infrastructure investment between other states and Kerala has widened very seriously. And this is creating, which has become a major impediment to accelerating domestic growth. If you take any infrastructure sector, for the first time we are having 4-laning roads. For the first time we are having now a 400 kV, 440 kV transmission line. Most of our IT, non-IT parks of 1970s industrial estate vintage, and so on and so forth, any sector. Now, why is the urgency to overcome this infra deficit? Why does it become so important? One, so far our growth has been driven by remittances. Remittance impacting upon consumption-led services. Now, that can work in the reverse manner. If remittance goes down, you can have a situational reverse multiplier. You can have very deleterious social impact because there is stagnation and even decline in remittances. Mainly because the nature of migration has changed from temporary migration to Gulf to permanent migration to the West. In fact, if you go to Pathanamthitta and so on, a disinvestment is taking place. Those who settle permanently West, selling of their assets in Kerala and taking the money abroad. So this is a serious issue. Now, this can result in the deceleration of economic growth. In fact, articles have started coming regarding how Kerala is now one of the top five fast-growing economies, come down to bottom five economy in the recent period. When I had an article in Times of India. And because of infrastructural deficit, Kerala is the poorest investment destination. Hardly any external investment is coming into the economy when compared to other states. The investment boom is bypassing Kerala. Therefore, there is an urgent need to overcome accumulated infrastructure deficit within a short period. How do we do that? These are the possible options for Kerala. One, increase the budget public investment. Now, this can be done only if we cut the expenditure on welfare and social sectors. Otherwise, it will take a pretty long period, slowly. Kerala's capital expenditure in the budget, as we saw in the picture diagram, it has been going up, the chart. The blue line has been going up, inching up forward. But it's going to take a pretty long time before that Kerala catches with other states. So budget public investment is ruled out for the short period. Second would be special SPV public investment. You have a SPV, special vehicle, and that borrows and make investment. Third, you have the corporates to come and make investment. I'm not against any of them. We have examples of like Kochi Metro or Kochi Airport and so on. But all such projects will have to be revenue earning projects. Otherwise, you cannot corporatize it. The SPV, whether corporate or state, will have to borrow money. And money can be borrowed only if the loan can be repaid. So it will have to be revenue earning projects. But look at the nature of capital deficit in Kerala. We cannot have revenue earning models. See, because of the settlement pattern of Kerala, we can have a toll model development in our state highways or district roads. Because toll model would imply service roads, which would mean huge acquisition costs. Apart from the fact that socially there will be big resistance, it will be too costly. Therefore, the biggest component of infrastructure investment, the state highways and district roads, you cannot really apply the revenue model. You can have a revenue model for upgrading your schools or hospitals and so on. So much of the investment will have to take place in sectors which cannot be revenue-earning. Therefore, 2 and 3, though welcome, cannot be relied upon. So what did Kerala do? Kerala was starting upon what is called annuity program. You tender a project, but the contractor will have to borrow and undertake construction. The payment will be made by the state over a period of 15 to 20 years. So the contractor would factor in the implicit interest cost and take the tender. This is annuity program. Payment is made by the state through an annual payment to the contractor. So while as a minister, we took an exercise. What is the implicit interest rate? It was stunning. In one project, the implicit interest rate was 20%. Implicit interest rate factored in ranges between 12 to 20%, while actual interest rate would be 7, 8, 9%. Why? Only those contractors who can mobilize this much resources can participate in the tender. So competition is much less, and therefore they can get away with any quote. Therefore, annuity programs, though very plausible, is too costly. And therefore, this was the reason that the state moved to KIFBI program. KIFBI is also an annuity program, you see. Okay, you have an institution, KIFBI, Kerala Infrastructure Investment Fund Board. And it is given a contract to build, say, 80,000 crores of infrastructure, various types. They have to take loan and construct it. And the government in return promises to pay them an annuity. In fact, they would be securitizing the future income flows from the government taking loan and constructing it. This is the KIFBI model. Instead of government going for negotiating with each individual contractor, there is an institution whose whole purpose is to make investment in infrastructure. So how was it done, this model? One, there is legislation. So it's a separate legislation forming the KIFBI. Two, what is its activity? It is to mobilize resources and monitor the execution of projects. Stated half the motor vehicles tax and the petrol cess would be given as annuity. So financial support and with a very strong governance structure for this institution. I will speak about it later. Okay, it's a setup. Now it is very difficult to read perhaps the numbers. It simply shows the flow of funds from the government, which shows it is increased from 7 to 9 in 1617, 2042, 2,600, 2,200, 2,172, 2,390. Despite COVID, we ensure the funds was kept up. And then 2004-69. So an assured income flow did take place. And what did KIFBI do? For 60,000 rupees worth infrastructure was entered or being drawn up. About 20,000 crores have been assigned for acquiring land for these works. So total about 80,000 crores infrastructure is in the pipeline. And now implementation of this would transform Kerala's infrastructure to a great extent if we add to that the national highway construction that is going on. That's simply that. Now, this is a breakup of this investment in different sectors. Biggest chunk goes to public works, money dispersed. Money dispersed, then industries, water resources, and so on. Don't worry about these numbers. But now this is interesting. Look at these numbers. What has KIFBI done to the capital investment ratios of Kerala? If you look the bottom line, colored one, you'll find the state and KIFBI capital expenditure as percent of GSDP has risen to more than 2%, 2.5% in 21-22, 2%, 2.17%. So from around 1%, 1.5%, which used to be the ratio of capital expenditure of Kerala, now capex has increased to almost double as a percent of GSDP, and it would continue to rise. And of this total capital expenditure, as much as 30% to 40% is from KIFBI. This has been the impact of KIFBI on the capital investment scenario in Kerala. How did KIFBI raise these resources? This is given the breakup of the loans they've taken. 10 loans from banks, 10 from RECs, HUDCO, Masala bonds from NABARD. You have bonds of KSFE from Pravasi Chitti. And this contributes something like 1,000 crores. Loans, Pravasi dividend scheme, 313. So we have something like 22,000 crores rupees already taken as loan by KIFBI that is being invested. Now, what are the possible dangers and what precautions have been taken? This process is not without any threat or risk. One is prioritization. No, you're investing suddenly 80,000 crores. So how do you determine the priority? So the losses, though not part of government budget, the projects of KIFBI will be announced in the assembly and debated, but not one form a part of the government. So that is one. Two, what is the accountability? There is a legislative oversight. The records of KIFBI will have to be presented to the assembly, and the assembly committees can scrutinize it. How about corruption? See, there's a new system that is coming up. There is always a possibility of mismanagement and corruption. So you have a company auditor. Besides that, there's a peer audit by another company. Third, there is C&AG audit. So 3 audits. Now, how is the implementation taken? How does KIFBI have the talents to implement such a wide variety of programs? So you don't hire people but use SPVs. The concerned departments, they float their own implementation agents, independent government, because not a single pie of KIFBI can be spent directly by government. It is not even parked in the treasury. So there's no chance of KIFBI funds being misused by the state government. Now for implementation, there are SPVs for specialized agencies for each sector set up by the departments who will monitor the implementation, ensure the standards and so on. And there is a mechanism in KIFBI which will see, cross-check and ensure the standards are maintained. Finally, there is a liquidity risk. Will KIFBI, suppose KIFBI takes up now 80,000 crores, what prevents them from taking up 1.5 lakh crores or 2 lakh crores? And you may end up in a big liquidity problem. And government burden it will come on government. For this, there is a asset and liability match mechanism. This is the asset and liability match mechanism. It tracks inflows into the KIFBI. One, support from government. Two, borrowings of KIFBI. Three, receipts from this revenue earning projects. These are the inflows. Then you have the outflows, the project payouts. When contractors present the bill, the bill has to be paid. There's debt servicing. So you have inflows, outflows. You have assets, liability. Now this is automatically generated. Any new projects taken up, immediately the program would say what will be the impact upon the liability curve. When will it start going up because of this project? The whole principle is at no time should the asset curve, the inflow curve, the asset inflow curve be below the liability curve. Liability curve will have always to be below the asset curve. There will be no liquidity risk. So this is something constantly done. You take up a new project, okay, the project profile, when will the payment come and so on, that payout, will it push the liability curve or asset curve, then that project will not be undertaken. This is the mandate of the director board. This is the mandate. This is the issue at which FTAC would be checking. FTAC is Fund Trust Fidelity Board. This Fund Trust Fidelity, the Fidelity Trust Board, headed by very senior people like former CNAG Vinod Roy or executive directors of Reserve Bank and SEBI and so on. They have real-time access to all documents of KIFBI. And one of the main tasks is, in fact, to see the assets and liabilities to match. Therefore, there is no chance of a liquidity risk. Now, this trouble has come. And this is where I stop. I'm not answering everything. I'm leaving it for debate. There's a FRBA map. This says the state government borrowing cannot be more than 3% of the GSDP. Now, central government has taken the position that this borrowing by KIFBI, because liability ultimately comes to the government, is part of government borrowing and infringes upon the FRBA Act. And they have cut the normal borrowing of the state government, pushing the state government into a very serious financial crisis. Now, what are the arguments against? Central government accounting practice, the extra budgetary borrowing or off-budget borrowing is not part of the fiscal deficits. I said two terms, off-budget borrowing and extra budgetary borrowing. Off-budgetary borrowing is something very special meaning. It means the project, a program which is in the budget, government doesn't have money, so a public sector borrows and spends for that project, and government pays it back. The public sector unit sometime later. That's off-budget borrowing. Extra budget borrowing is not something like that at all. It's not part of government accounting. The institution takes a loan and invests. It has nothing to do with the government. India government undertakes off-budget borrowing of something like 5 lakh crores every year. which is mentioned in as annexure to the budget, but doesn't form a part of the deficit calculation. Even now, I can give the details later if you want. So it's not the accounting practice of the government of India. Every state government has been undertaking annuity programs or even off-budget borrowing. In the annuity program, the contractor is borrowing for government, but it's not part of the fiscal deficit calculation. But the new central directive says if we borrowing is part of the fiscal deficit, part of government borrowing with retrospective effect, which means 22,000 crores have been borrowed, that 20,000 crores will have to be made good now. How can you make rules with retrospective effect? This is the problem. But take the case of FRBM. This simple table gives the fiscal deficit of the center and states and revenue deficit of the center and states from 2001 when FRBM Act was brought. You will find something very interesting. The bottom line, the fiscal deficit of the states from 4% has come down to 1.97, 2.21, 2.63, 3.10, 3.5. States by and large has complied with the fiscal deficit. In fact, in many years, it is much below what is permissible. Take centers, 5.6, now it's still 4%, 3.8%, 3.52%. Not a single year has central government complied with the FRBM Act. According to FRBM Act, revenue deficit has to be zero. States fiscal deficit, which was 2.54 in 2001, has became surplus or marginally 3.3%. They have complied with the FRBM Act. Look at the center. It has averaged something like 3%. So there is an asymmetry in the manner in which FRBM Act is being implemented by the center and state, and center is using to now support the state's program using the same law. Now, this is the interesting thing. You know, the government of any state government or central government, all revenues goes into what is called consolidated fund. And from the consolidated fund, the money is spent. So every day there can be a surplus or deficit in the treasury. This is not revenue deficit and fiscal deficit. It's a cash flow revenue deficit. So cash is a cash flow, surplus or deficit. Look at this. Before FRBM Act came, states were spending all the money they get. Now, after the FRBM Act came, the cash surplus in the state treasuries, all treasuries average, has been steadily going up. States borrow, but then the law says you cannot use your borrowed funds for revenue expenditure. Very truthfully, they don't spend. They have so much internalized this neoliberal rules, they don't spend. Instead, the hard-earned money, spending 7 to 8% interest, is borrowed and kept in the treasury without spending because they don't want to spend on revenue expenditure. They stick to the rules. And this entire money then, after 3 days, is taken by the Reserve Bank and put into Government of India securities. So state governments are financing the borrowing and financing central government. You know, this graph, if I had extended it to COVID period, it became 3 lakh crores. Can you imagine that? In COVID, when people were left without food, medicine, and so on. States, after having borrowed, do not spend because there's revenue expenditure. That's the internal, the conviction. Let's see. Why am I putting in this? To tell the simple reason, one hat won't fit all sizes. The states have different approaches and development trajectories. Take the case of Kerala. Even in the colonial period or in the post-independence period, Kerala chose a path of development which was based upon investment in the social sectors. Other states did. And that's the regional development autonomy here. We made a choice. Now it has plus point. You have better conditions for people. It has a minus point. You have an infrastructure deficit. So now Kerala is drawing up a scheme to overcome this. It's a regional development policy. Other states don't need that. Fine. The revenue deficit is 2.5 means a part of the permissible borrowing they're not using. That's the freedom. I don't get that. From macroeconomic sense, what matters is not what each state borrows, what is the fiscal or revenue deficit of state, but all states average, which by and large has been complied with. Therefore, I would end my presentation underlining the importance of regional developmental autonomy. The challenges are not same. In every state, they're very different. For whatever reasons, I respect. Although I would argue with Bihar Minister, Bihar government, other governments that you spend more on education. Okay. This is their choice here. They have not spent fine. But Kerala has chosen a different path. Now wants to pursue a different. The reason I gave the initial strategy, etc., before going into the capital, the deficit and methods to overcome it is to tell you this is not a haphazard action being taken. It's part of a overall developmental perspective that's being put forward. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Isaac, for those really wonderful lecture and very important insights about the challenges that Kerala is facing in the infrastructure sector, particularly with respect to the funding of that infrastructure, that the fact that the capital expenditure in Kerala is lagging behind other states, and the role that KIFBI has played in bridging that gap, and the new challenges that is arising in this situation, where particularly focusing on the FRBM Act and the macro issues related to that. So this is a very, very important policy related question that we are discussing, and I would like to kind of invite questions or comments from the audience. There are participants also in the online participants. They can also raise questions. And first, from the audience here, any question or comments? Yes.
So, you be devil's advocate and start there.
So let me then, like initial some question. Yeah, but in fact, I'm going to ask a more practical kind of question. See, when you explain different kind of dangers, risk against the KIFBI model, you didn't really speak about the risk
which is coming from a major change in the central government policy. That risk has come. They are interpreting fiscal deficit in a different way. They are interpreting even FRBM Act in a different way. So KIFBI financing is in a danger. You told it very clearly that the central government is going to consider KIFBI borrowing as government borrowing. That means government cannot borrow even up to 3%. A huge deficit in government reduction in government borrowing is going to come. So in practice, how this is going to be solved? How are you going to face up to this challenge? There is a practical question also, because when you borrow in the government channel, the rate of interest will be lower than the normal KIFBI borrowing from the banks or other sources. So if the government is financing the infrastructure investment through government borrowing, the cost of borrowing will be lower. But when you borrow through the KIFBI route, the rate of interest will be high.
Yeah, that's interesting point. See, government, state governments and government of India have assured market SLR bonds. Now, banks, they like it or not, will have to set apart a particular proportion of the deposits as loans to government, the bonds to government. So it's a captive market and rates are relatively low. But that is also set by the market. Rates differ from auction to auction and state government to state government. But the reason that we moved to KIFBI is that state government's limits have reached. It cannot borrow without permission of the center. And there is a limit to that, 3% of GSPP. But given the concrete development juncture of that Kerala has reached, it's important at the earliest we overcome the infrastructure deficit. And that's the reason we have chosen this path, you see. So that comparison is not valid simply because government borrowing, because of a previous commitment on social sectors, cannot now be used for capital expenditure. Please.
Yeah, so my comments or questions are more related to the implications of, it's well taken that there is an infrastructure deficit and we have to finance it. And Dr. Isaac mentioned various ways in which it can be done. KIFBI is one of those models. Now, the one question is that because there are challenges to the KIFBI model, and if we are not in a position to kind of defend this way of funding infrastructure, then what is the alternative that is in front of us? So that is one question. What is the way that we can look alternative ways of funding if KIFBI model is not acceptable, and if this faces challenges, what is alternative? That is one question. The other one is when we look at the the desirability of the KIFBI model, as you rightly said, we have to see that whether the asset and liability matching is very important. But at the same time, don't you also think that because the rate of return from this investment is very difficult to calculate, because most of the time the investments are made in public infrastructure from which we cannot calculate the exact rate of return. But at the same time, isn't it also important to make some assessment of that, like, the multiplier impact of this investment, how these investments are leading to employment generation and GDP growth in the country, the nature of specialization, or nature of production structure itself undergoing changes as a result of this investment. So just looking at it from a very accounting perspective, narrow accounting perspective alone, may not be the right way of looking at the desirability or the, whether it's a good or bad So isn't it that a important research question that we also need to look at?
Yeah. First question is, if KIFBI option is not there, what is the other option? Well, I have put for the 5 options before Kerala. Now, Kerala will make a choice if it wants to overcome the infrastructure deficit, whether it want to focus upon social sectors as in the past or cut, but it is too rigid. If I employed teachers, if I employed they have constructed hospitals, you cannot withdraw. It's a committed expenditure, you see. So that choice, I mean, that is not an option. And regarding say, certain revenue earning projects, about 25% of the KIFBI projects are also revenue earning, like, for example, KFON or land acquisition for industrial estates. They're all revenue earning. So they could be put under different SPVs. So that is a normal practice. But majority of projects cannot be undertaken. Therefore, blocking this new initiative would mean a major setback for Kerala's development. That's the, you don't have much option other than this. Now, the second question is even more important. How do we look at the cost benefit of these investments that are being undertaken? It's very difficult. Of course, anything we can do social cost benefit analysis. But certain things are taken for granted, even if the exact numbers wouldn't matter very much. It's academic exercise. Take, for example, the national highway investment that is taking place. This NH 66 is about 65,000 crores program, investment program. That investment would never occur unless Kerala government gives 6,000 crores upfront for land acquisition. There is no way that you can take 6,000 crores from the current budgetary resources. And that's the reason, for so many years, nothing was happening. Now, because you have a KIFBI which has put aside 20,000 crores for land acquisition, 6,000 crores was made down payment to the central government, and you have something happening, a 65,000 crores investment taking place. Or else usually the criticism of this nature would come with respect to the investment that is being made by KIFBI in schools and hospitals, whatever school education sector. Is that the priority? How did it start? In my strategy for Kerala's development, mentioned about knowledge economy. So digitalization is going to be an important part of this transformation of Kerala. Now, something that can happen is that, unlike our past inclusive tradition, a major segment can be left out, the digital divide. Therefore, you have made a social choice. No, Kerala will not suffer from the digital divide. Therefore, with this perspective of something that is going to happen in your development process, you start digitalization of schools. Every classroom, you have computer-aided teaching. Once you moved there, then you suddenly realize the buildings, you cannot put them up. They are not fit for that. They are not even secured. Okay, then you decided, okay, we'll have better buildings. Then you decide that the children should have access to internet in the house. So you start a KFON, for which an analysis was done. With cross-subsidization from the public sector and other sectors, you can give free to the poor people. So KFON comes in. Now, these are part of your social perspective in development. You want to keep the development process inclusive, ensures everybody access to new digital technology. So you have an investment program there. So it is important. I agree with you. I have no difference. Money is scarce. It's not there for plentiful for asking. And therefore, you have to make a prioritization. Prioritization would mean a kind of analysis about what are the implications. But the nature of investment has been such that about more than 50% goes for upgrading the roads and industrial parks. Just would come. So with some cost benefit analysis definitely do take place. In fact, KIFBI project insists on such an analysis for passage consideration by the board. Therefore, the KIFBI process itself ensures a kind of analysis of this. I agree with you. But what I want to tell you was, it is a social cost benefit analysis. There are higher, larger social commitments which are involved in such an analysis. Yeah. I promised that scholars, students a book for the question.
So can you unmute the participants, online participants? They want to speak. Anyone?
Oh, it is an online discussion that was coming in.
Sir, may
Yes, there's a student.
sir, based on what you just said, also having read your book, so I have the KIFBI model and the following knowledge economy seems to be heavily reliant on prospective future growth and development of a particular pattern. In the sense, first it relies on a great deal of skill development and the skill developed youth or graduates being employed in several service sectors, which doesn't happen automatically. Like, I mean, India has never been, I mean, a state or I'm saying the government has not involved in much in, like a public sector driven growth has never happened in service sector in India, especially in this skilled areas. In that case, like mostly in Indian experience, we have seen industrialized states have been able to benefit from the service sector boom, where the technical graduates which are required for the industrial development have also served for service sector boom in India. But Kerala has never had a history of industrial growth. Second, the KIFBI based infrastructural development model can attract possibly high-tech industries. But high-tech industries itself are not they don't have very big potential for large-scale employment. By definition, they are, very capital intensive and also very not labor absorbing. So how does this KIFBI model wish to address that in the sense, like, I mean, like the case of Tamil Nadu, where industry served as the growth of, engine of service sector boom in Tamil Nadu. So, but that doesn't happen in Kerala. That has never happened in Kerala. And given the geographical limitations of Kerala, I don't think it will happen. Like, it is very difficult to happen. So, how does Kerala intend to address
That's
that?
right. As you said. Devika, may I respond to him? Then Venus. You are right. A choice is made regarding the nature of future industrial growth in Kerala. That's though it's not explicitly stated, the kind of heavy industrialization pattern of land abundant kind of states in India cannot be adopted for highly densely populated, land scarce, water connected region like Kerala. Therefore, you have chosen appropriate industries appropriate to the resource endowments of Kerala are knowledge-based industries, skill-based industries, service-based industries. Now, the choice is made. We are not saying nothing else should come, but this is the choice. These are more appropriate to us. Now, two questions come. How do you get skilled labor force there? You have to skill them. How do you get investment for them? Okay, infrastructure would attract investment. And if it doesn't come, you promote your startups, your educated young force to start it, create a startup innovation ecosystem. That's the strategy. So you're right. The choice that is laid down is slightly different from the traditional path of industrialization. But it doesn't mean nothing else is be there. Knowledge economy means the technological base of existing traditional industries and agriculture would be transformed. The reason to underline this is because Kerala has been, in fact, to a great extent, even stopping this technical change, because that has been a social process of bargaining that did take place. So it's a major break telling no. Now it's open for innovation and upgradation. So these sectors will be the agriculture is not going to be, but agriculture will have to be based upon new technology, the traditional one, and agro-processing based upon the new technology. Or even traditional industries, the technical base will have to be transformed. I don't want to go into details. So this would provide employment to, now it's a global employment. After COVID, it's also normal to work from home. If you work from home or near home, doesn't matter whether you're sitting in the New York home or Kerala home here. The challenge is to create such hard skills so that Kerala becomes an attractive destination for this kind of recruitment also. Now, what does KIFBI do? KIFBI creates decentralized infrastructure for such a decentralized industrial development. You can work not need to be Kochi or Trivandrum, yeah, you can work from your home. You have work near home stations, you have connectivity there, the skilled labor force there. So it's a vision of a very different pattern of development. I'm not saying this is better than Tamil Nadu or anything. What I'm saying is this is more appropriate for Kerala. So your comment is well taken, and you have understood what was the implicit in it. Please, Devia.
I mean, I'm just thinking as a historian. I'm really not asking about KIFBI. I'm asking you about the vision that is underlying your talk generally. I mean, in the 20th century, in the Nehruvian times, in the 20th century, soon after India's independence, you had Nehruvian developmentalism as an overarching framework. And I think in Kerala's big achievement was that we actually brought in another version. I called it egalitarian developmentalism, which focus, which essentially, I mean, the fundamentals were definitely Nehruvian in the sense that large industry was preferred, but the social development angle, the social justice and redistribution angle, as you pointed out, was present, and that was what made it different. Now, in the 21st century, I think we have a technocratic, techno-centered, neoliberal vision of development that is hegemonic in India. And to my mind, it seems to be replicated in Kerala as well. I mean, the faith in not just technology driving agriculture, industry, etc., is present in your talk, which I agree. I mean, we need new technology in all these areas, but the faith in technology as democratic oversight, that troubles me. The big difference in the Nehruvian model, between the Nehruvian model and Kerala's experiment of the 20th century, was the presence of the people.
Yes.
Which for all the talk about extending digital services to the entire state, to all children, all that is fine. But that does not add up to the respect for democracy. And just to, your own experiment, in the 1990s, which I think is really the base for a lot of our studies on Panchayati Raj now, the Panchayat Development Report of 1996, which was built with such absolutely wonderful participation. You led that effort. We don't. Just compare it with the disaster management reports that came, such impoverished documents which serve no purpose. So my question in short is, how are people going to figure in this vision? I mean, this is not about KIFBI, because a lot of what you said is relevant. I mean, I understand we need new technology in every field. We need new skilling. All that is granted. But where are people in this vision? Unfortunately, I don't see people. And in practical terms, one is seeing a lot of police rather than the people. That's my question to you. Thank you.
It's very good that everybody has to be vigilant and very democratic oversight is very, very important about this process. But let me put this way. You're right. The technology is a prime driver of growth in this new phase. Because the whole infrastructure development is essentially to attract investment to ensure the technological base of the economy is transformed. But this transformation has to be optimized within the constraints of certain social visions, which includes one, gender justice, environmental sustainability, and protection of poor. These are the three constraints within which this optimization has taken place. Now, why was something like 7,000, 8,000 crores set apart for school digitization, upgradation, and care form? If you have decided that, all right, doesn't matter, sometime after growth, technology upgradation, it will come down to everybody. So why now bother to digitize every classroom or connect every household with care phone? Would have saved some 7,000 crores. This is precisely your strategy in the vision, strategical vision is about the inclusive. New phase should be inclusive. That's the constraint within which, that's a social choice made. That's a constraint within which optimization takes place. So this, whether it is maintained, this vision is maintained, kept, that's a democratic process of criticism and pointing out, etc., which would keep things in line. That is the process of democracy. I agree with you. So I agree with you. This is a very, very important aspect that has to be kept in mind. The reference to the disaster management reports. Now, let me put it this way, my position on decentralization. In fact, the 3 points are new paradigm. The first two I have been personally involved in not conceiving it, but also implementing it, KIFBI and People's Plan. Now, People's Plan decentralization, what has it given to Kerala? It has enlarged the local democratic space. See, I am no more a minister, but many panchayats, okay, not any panchayat, many panchayats, I find a space to work. Intervene. That is made. If you want to do something good, there is a possibility for you to intervene and do that. Earlier, that democratic space was not there. So there are about 1/4 of the panchayats are exemplary here. I mean, something I'm proud of. Going there is a great pleasure. It points out the potential of this kind of decentralization program. There are another quarter is corrupt. Around half would be so average. But there is a possibility. Wherever conscious citizenry is there who criticize, who intervenes, challenges, things improve. Now, what happened to? But there is also issue. Over time, things get routinized. That kind of participatory spirit dies out. Transparency norms are given go by. Despite the fact that there is a space for you to protest, and you don't have to go to secretariat to protest here. The panchayat office is nearby. You can walk there. So that is the democracy. Disaster management. I was also putting great expectation on this program because for me it looked like something like the development reports of 1999. No, 1997. Every panchayat prepares a disaster manager with something unique in the world. But I think, Devika, you forgot about the fact that COVID came in between. Yes. Yeah. No. I was personally involved. So because we were thinking of a training, starting it, relooking at it, and then the entire program collapsed. Now, after 2 years to go back to the program, where it has left, the continuity is lost. But looking forward to tomorrow, it is something path-breaking, something which has not happened anywhere. Local people themselves taking up climate change and the disaster management program. Might we say protesting? No.
Just take away attention from development and focus it on culture and spoil, everything. No, but I also, for the sake of students, I just want a clarification from you. Can you kind of tell us the difference between infrastructure and technology? I mean, you've been using these as kind of interchangeable. So can you clarify that?
Infrastructure and?
Infrastructure and technology.
See, infrastructure, technology is more generic term which underlies any production system or infrastructure. Infrastructure is only one of the specific sectors for technology use. Technology is the basis of agriculture, industry, and so on. And now to adopt this technology, you will require electricity. Electricity would mean Kerala has only 220 kV transmission lines here. You cannot import electricity from outside. Not a single kilometer of 440 kV transmission line. So you need transmission lines and so on. You need distribution. Now from every transformer, only one line comes. Therefore, something happens to a transformer, one thing, then current goes. Suppose you have two connectivity for distribution, things would be very different. So this means new technology. In fact, the cost of this transmission line has been half. Because initially the whole thing was a new line to be taken. It's like building a road, acquiring land all over. What are our scientists here, technologists here? They ensure from the existing 220 kV line would be upgraded. They would add something more on the top and have the 440 kV to go. That saves something like 4,000, 5,000 crores. So even for apart from the fact infrastructure facilitates technology development in other sectors, choice of technologies is a very, very important for infrastructure. And this choice of technology, social concerns are the ecological concerns, the gender concerns. I don't deny them all. No.
So, Parameshwar, please.
Regarding your conclusion that we need regional autonomy. Yeah, I think regional autonomy or more freedom in planning and investing. But as long as we are a part of the union, we are bound to follow certain norms and regulations of this union government. But in this specific context, the norms of the union government is also is questionable. For example, you look at what is the sanctity of that 3% of the budget. The deficit. For example, it is 3% for state government and 3% for central government, remaining for the what is called the corporate sector, because earlier you were borrowing only from the domestic market. Now we can borrow from outside also. That is why it's not a concern. Then another thing is that in the whole discussion, what you can see is that usually when we discuss the public debt, what matters is the debt sustainability. If your GDP is growing faster than your debt, then over time, your debt become very small part of your GDP. And provided that your tax receipts also being a constant part of your GDP, then it won't be an issue in the long term. So why are we constrained to this? Why are we constraining this to 3% norm? That is also questionable. Then also note that the discussion, you can see that usually financial plus or something, when we discuss the public debt, we have tendency to equate the individual or company borrowing to a country borrowing. These are two different things. A country can have multiplier effect or general equilibrium effect, and risk can be much lower, particularly in the present Kerala context. We have human capital, and therefore, if we can solve the infrastructure deficit, it is quite possible that the economy will grow fast. And that is, I think that is precisely the central government is doing. They're heavily investing in infrastructure now, in terms of roads, highways, all these things. So that may be true in Kerala also. So instead of, we also need to question these norms also, whether it is relevant now. And of course, if we are not, while there must be norms which is which should not be misutilized. For example, if we give unlimited freedom for borrowing, then the government may overborrow and use for consumption. There must be checks and balances, but there must be the restrictions must be reasonable. These norms needs to be also questioned. And if the central government is too much concerned with the rating agencies, then because this is also related to our understanding of the public debt and what is the role of the government. Definitely, private sector will not invest in the long-term infrastructure projects where the government has to invest. So it needs borrowing. So these norms also needs to be appropriately designed.
Yes. So you have raised a number of questions. To start with, what is regional autonomy? Now, how can you have such autonomy when for country as a whole has a vision? There's a principle what is called subsidiarity. It is under subsidiarity that we give autonomy within the sphere to the local government. Indian constitution accepts that three-tier system. Each has their sphere in which they operate. So that autonomy is trying to be eradicated through a concept of nation devoid of all diversity. So there is a space for autonomy. Two, Will such autonomy rebel against the national norms that we have paid up? Take 3%. What I demonstrated was states as a whole don't use 3%. So it's an imaginary thing. The states are borrowing left and right and so on. They have their own trajectory here. While Kerala government is for the temporary period to overcome this infrastructure investment, that we are going to have this extra budgetary borrowing. Now, that's not going to affect the macroeconomic variables. 3% is maintained. If every state was following that, okay, then there is some saying, no. It's not. Forget about extra budgetary borrowing. Normal borrowing is not fully used. Whatever borrowed is not spent. It is accumulated as cash surplus in the treasury. So that is that argument doesn't hold to me. Then comes the issue, okay, you borrow, but is your debt sustainable? No, look here. We have been teaching economics, and there is a definition for debt sustainability, Domar equation. Which says that as long as your rate of growth of GDP is higher than the rate of interest, your debt is sustainable. From 1987, Kerala growth rate has been higher than the rate of interest, except for COVID period also. One learned person, I don't want to name anybody, but has been published in the Kerala rate of growth has been below rate of interest. He has taken real rate of growth compared with the real and compared with the interest rate. You take the nominal rate of growth. He's really very, very senior person. I don't want to say. I was asked to seeing that. This just is nothing sustainable. Nothing. So the question is, you want the government to do it, you want the corporate to do it. That's the choice. The country, the policy makers have made choice that the corporate will do. Even agriculture section is going to be run by corporates. Not to forget about infrastructure. But tell me, in macroeconomic terms, is there a difference between a government entity borrowing and a corporate borrowing? What's the difference? I put reasonable restrictions on the borrowing, the asset liability matching. So what's the difference? No, that's your ideological predictions. And I have showed even the specific features of Kerala's geography and human settlement pattern. Much of this investment cannot be made from revenue earning programs. So this is the only choice. So you are making, just like we did make a choice in the 1940s for focusing upon 40s and 50s on social sector, we are making a change, a paradigm shift with a larger vision of development. I think there is should be a legitimate space for. I agree with you. This has to be done reasonably. Money is important. The way it is spent and so on and so forth. Yes. That is the democratic constraint within which the program will go. I'm not upset about controversies that I mean, so much debate about this. That's fine. Let me know. But I want to make a statement which goes beyond academics. That statement is this debate and criticism made about Kerala's debt burden, debt trap, and this and that has disarmed our state from resisting this kind of central intervention to the state right. Putting 22,000 retrospective effect as borrowed to be met from the current, cut from the current borrowing. There is no resistance in the state because people have been disarmed here. So that's a political statement, General Academy. Giving motivation to it. Sorry, that's not the thing. Fine.
There is Dr. Mrutulipan has raised her hand. So, Dr. Mrutul, if you are there, please ask your question.
You will get people who will be earning now probably. If investment is taking place in schools, there's a lot of the employment being generated in constructing of schools, but there may be new teachers being employed. There may be new special teachers for running those smart classrooms being employed. So there's an employment which is being generated also, part of which may be paying taxes. You see, because I'm working on tax and gender equity now, this has come to my mind. They may be paying taxes. So you will be having some revenue being generated if you can map the type of employment that is being generated out of this 80,000 crores of investment. Suddenly I was thinking of the old economics. Investment and employment is linked. So what is this employment being generated by the 80,000 crores? Which also means, I come to another point, the prioritization. We have to prioritize. And this, this in the sense that now should we have those investments which will have a quick return? I'm not saying you give up your social norms, but don't go into more of these parks and all that. First we should see that those parks get occupied a little bit. And then we go in for investment in those parks. So I'm saying link it to the knowledge economy. What are the sorts of people whom we should be producing to be able to work in this new investment opportunities that have been opened up? Initially, as I said, it will be the less educated construction workers, but we're going to get workers who will be occupying, more, what should I say, well-paying jobs, and would probably also be able to pay taxes. And so some revenue would start coming. So besides, of course, the revenue which comes later when those units get established. So this is something I was trying to link up investment with employment to some extent. To allay larger fears about KIFBI funding, you can at least say that, okay, if this happens, there's less of a fear or less of a risk in KIFBI funding.
Yes, one of the, yeah. Infrastructure, the direct employment generated is would be limited, particularly in a place like Kerala, where construction workers now currently come from outside, migrant workers. So its impact on employment would come in the next round. Say when electricity is plentiful, new units of production comes up, or the parks begins to set up, attracts investment, and so on and so forth. So precisely to create employment, bring down unemployment in Kerala, you need investment in infrastructure. That's the argument. Now, there is a second point I would like to make. The mandate of KIFBI is such that it cannot set up production units directly or have revenue expenditure. It's pure and simple capital expenditure only. That's the mandate. Now, to have this investment firm to borrow and then directly or through units promoted by it to create employment, I think would be against this mandate and would bring into another controversy of revenue expenditure being made by the KIFBI borrowing. But I agree with you. One, as far as the projects, as many projects are concerned, should be as many as possible should be revenue earning. From 25%, you should think if it can go more. Second, once certain infrastructure is made, then his full utilization should be a concern. Let me put it this way. Now you have digitalized schools. Okay, that facility is there. Now every school can be a skilling center here. You have infrastructure there. It's not just not for the classroom hours which will be used. It can be used even much longer time. so on. So we have to pay much more attention to the say spread effects from the infrastructure that is being created. We have to plan ahead. You see, say for example, though it is controversial, the coastal highway. We have to already think much ahead in terms of its impact upon tourism, how it can be maximized and so on. You have to think in terms of connecting up, thinking of your say, spices route. Okay, this will be linking up all the ports and the spices route which we used to think. How can we? You see, we have to think ahead of utilizing the infrastructure that is made. But I don't think, Mridul, this KIFBI funds could be directly used for creation of employment.
No, I never meant that. I never meant that. I am saying KIFBI is going to schools. KIFBI is going into hospitals. KIFBI is going into roads. KIFBI is going into other structures. No, schools, maybe some new people have been recruited for, how to run these smart classrooms. Hospitals, more doctors have been recruited more. I'm not saying KIFBI has to do it. No. I know that very clearly. I'm saying we should try to map whatever is happening with the money in terms of employment. It's very important. It also links up with the knowledge economy.
That's right, Mridul. I agree with you. No difference of opinion to that statement. One said, even while infrastructure is being built, we have to think in terms of its forward linkages to production sectors and how that linkages can be maximized. That is not up to the mark. I agree with you.
Just one last this thing. So the choice of the projects under KIFBI funding, I think there is a need to think like, it's a social cost benefit analysis is one approach. Apart from that, from a conceptual point of view, like, which sector should get KIFBI funding and which sector should not get KIFBI funding. I think that need to be thought at a very conceptual level, and based on our understanding in economics, for example, I think a government direct funding in infrastructure would be always justified in a situation where we think that there is a market failure, and also in a situation where we think there are positive externalities which a government infrastructure investment can create, from which the rest of the sectors can benefit from that. Now, there is also a concern that, in deciding this, so one is the market failure justification. The other one is related to that is the externality argument. And the other one is the possibility of crowding out of the private investment. So if KIFBI get into a sector where a private investment is actually possible and feasible based on their own cost calculations, then it may lead to a crowding out of that possible investment. So I think there is a need to look at this issue, which is sector to be funded or not, based on that conceptual point of view.
I have no difference with the statement made. The first point being the first point?
The market failure.
Yeah. The market failure should be the rationale. And that's precisely, from this, what is there on the screen, the argument that even the specific geographical and other features of Kerala, the market has failed to come up with a solution to the infrastructure deficit in Kerala. So it's a forced march to development that you make up. You see, this is a big investment boom taking place. Country and Kerala should not be left out, has come up. So this is a way of attracting in, not crowding out, but attracting in investment into Kerala, which is not taking place. In the infrastructure per se, well, see, even annuity programs, so few people come to for tender. That's the reason the implicit interest rate goes to astounding levels. So there is a market failure for various reasons. So that is precisely my argument, that state has to step in. Then crowding out, no. In fact, this infrastructure, we should attract more investment in Kerala. And this crowding out is something macro for the country. Macro, there's equity, this is a saving available, and okay, government takes more of it, less first. But within a state, the crowding out theory doesn't hold. Then I'm a very small player in the national market. Suppose every state is doing this, then there is a problem. But it's not. That's precisely the argument. For whatever reasons, states are not spending even the borrowed money. So there is no question of Kerala crowding out. But this has been and also the choice you mentioned. I agree with you. There have been problems. Now, to tell you the truth, in 3 months' time was the time left for me to make announcement of all the projects. So there would be certain problems. With 80,000, some few will not even be implementable. Reason it was taken was that to strike the iron wealth is hot. Certain lenience are given the first year, which you don't get in the later years. So we thought by putting it out in the first budget itself, by the end of the government, the projects would materialize. But we didn't expect the floods and then the COVIDs. So it got prolonged. So in that rush, your criticism, was there that road better than, more important than this? So only way the choice was made was that you discuss with the MLAs and others. Okay, in your constituency, you know better which is the best choice. Give your thing. Having a team of engineers, retired and present, to go through and make a assessment of what has been given. So that prioritization was done in this manner because that's how in practice governance goes. But once you have decided in the 5th year this has to be completed, if it was completed, none of these problems which Kerala is facing today would have come. It's because it got delayed that there was sufficient time to have this kind of, I don't want to believe in conspiracy theories, but created the problem.
So there is one question in the
Yeah.
chat box. Shall I read?
Yeah.
KIFBI is a neoliberal contrivance. We are vehemently arguing for it and at the same time fighting against a FRBM Act, which is also a legal outcome of the same philosophy.
Yeah. We live in the neoliberal world, in a neoliberal economy, not outside it. Yeah, we live. You have to engage with the thing, otherwise you go to sannyasa. You can't touch anything, it's all neoliberal. You understand it's neoliberal, and within the neoliberal framework, you're trying to have a choice which is better for the people. Let me put it that way. Which is not even accepted by the neoliberal authorities. They want to scuttle it some way or other. So this is the way of engaging with. Before neoliberalism came, the government system in Kerala, how are they functioning? See, even a worker works within the capitalist economy, makes a partial demand. He doesn't run away from that. So you are in politics, you have given promise to people to do certain things, and you will have to engage with the existing reality and try to fashion an alternative to the extent possible. That has been what has been attempted. Thank you very much. It was very good. I give you a chance. Book is here. Kanjanappally students. One question. Look here, it doesn't matter if a question is high flown and so on.
So, thank you so much, Dr. Thomas Isaac, for that very thought-provoking and very comprehensive discussion. As expected in the very beginning, it is not just the discussion is not just confined to the title of the seminar. It was broader, covering all aspects of Kerala's development, the macroeconomics, development issues, history, everything, culture, all types of issues have been covered, which was very much expected from him. And so thank you all for coming. And I hope we all learned a lot from this. Thank you.